Our judges always say this when the CASA comes on Zoom or is in the courtroom with them, the kids light up just because I think they feel safer, but also that they know that this person, they've talked about what they want, and they know that this person is also going to elevate their concerns. We're not there to just tell the court what the kid wants. It is sharing that information, but also then bringing our perspective as we also think this is what they need and in their best interests so that the young person knows where we're coming from. But I think it is a sense of safety and security to have that caring adult with you during this process.
I am really excited to share that the Nonprofit Podcast Network will now be increasing the number of nonprofit stories we get to share. With the generous support from Cap Trust, fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations, you can find them in Sacramento, Roseville, and Folsom, Runyon Saltzman, Inc., RSE, Marketing, Advertising, and Public Relations, creating integrated communications committed to improving lives, and Western Health Advantage, a full-service healthcare plan for individuals, employer groups, and families. These businesses have made it possible for the Nonprofit Podcast Network to go from a once-a-month episode to once-a-week episode, allowing us to serve that many more nonprofit agencies in our community. Please give preference to these companies if you require their services, and if you don't, write, call, or comment on their websites with a thank you. Oh, and be very sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode every Wednesday. Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast Network. Our purpose and passion is to highlight a nonprofit organization in each episode, giving that organization an opportunity to tell their story in their words to better inform and educate the respective communities they serve, as well as provide one more tool for them to share their message to constituents and donors. Hi, I'm Jeff Holden, Principal of Multipoint Content Strategies and Hear Me Now Studio. We provide this forum pro bono to help build stronger communities through shared voices and to both encourage and support the growth of local nonprofit organizations through podcasting. Our conversation this episode is a deep dive into an organization we know as much by its acronym as we do its full name, CASA, or Court Appointed Special Advocate. I'm talking with Carol Noreen, Executive Director, CASA Sacramento County. It almost seems as if there should be an emphasis to her title, as she's been involved with CASA starting in 2001, then serving as Executive Director since 2006. Having started her career as an attorney after getting her law degree at McGeorge School of Law, she practiced in both the private and public sectors. She's a former fellow of Sierra Health Foundation's Health Leadership Program and a current member of the National CASA Gal Association's Suburban Leadership Council and the local legislative advocacy team. Her commitment to the program is evident by her tenure and her passion, as you'll hear in our conversation. When she's not advocating for our foster youth, she loves traveling the world with her daughter, hiking, and reading. This is going to be one of our more unique conversations because of the detail and the specificity of what the program is about. Carol, welcome.
Thank you very much.
First, as we address that detail, we're talking about CASA, and not everybody knows what that is. It's an acronym for what?
CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates, and we are a program that was designed by the juvenile court to serve specifically children in the foster care system. So the CASA acronym relates to someone taking an oath of service and becoming an officer of the juvenile court.
So this was an actual legal system identification to the program, correct?
Yes.
In some way?
A juvenile court judge in Seattle was over, seeing family cases and children in foster care and felt like there was a lack of detailed information about what the child was going through, that there wasn't anyone there speaking up for the child's best interest. And so he rallied a group of volunteers to create a program where people from the community would come in, be provided significant amount of training and guidance through the court process, but they would really be there to elevate the child's voice and their best interest so that the court then, meaning the judges, they would have more information to make these really important decisions about whether a child stays in foster care, whether a child goes home to mom and dad, decisions that really impact their lives. And it really was born out of a need for more detailed information and child-specific information.
Mm-hmm. On the child, what is the age range of a child that could end up in the system necessitating a CASA?
Children from birth through age 21 can be served through the foster care system, through the CASA programs, wherever they're at. It just depends on what that child's circumstances are and when they enter the system.
You kind of answered the why a child might need it. Can you walk us through some of the instances or maybe a couple of examples where that CASA, the court-appointed special advocate, was absolutely necessary in the process in the courtroom?
Yes, I think that the ability of the CASA to work specifically with one child or a sibling group is really key to their engagement and success in what they do. Unlike any other participant in the court process, they don't have a caseload of children and families. They are focused on that one child or sibling group that they're working with. And so, for example, we had children come into foster care, and sometimes they are placed together in a foster home with the hope of them either finding permanency there or going back home. But what can also happen is that children are placed in different homes, maybe because you have a teenager or a young child, and the foster families are not set up to have both of them there. So you have two children now who not only are grieving the loss of their family, but now their loss of their sibling and that connection as well. CASA have been instrumental in those kinds of circumstances. We had an example of one sibling set, kids closer in age. One was about 5 or 6 and one was middle school aged, placed in different homes. And the system began to track them on different tracks. The younger child was in a home that was a pre-adoptive home, so they were considering separating the siblings, and perhaps the younger child would be adopted into a new family. That option was not available to the older youth. The older youth was in a home and may have bounced around or maybe even went back to their biological family at some point. But the CASA really identified a connection between the two children and was instrumental in asking the court for some assessments about the interactions between the children and the importance of that relationship between the two of them. And because of that involvement and that extra attention that was paid when the CASA brought that to the attention of the court and worked with the social workers and the attorneys to make sure those assessments were done, the CASA was able to help them identify that these kids really did need to stay together, and they ended up being in a family together, placed together, and that's only because the CASA was sort of a squeaky wheel in that circumstance. And then the children were eventually adopted together.
Wow.
And it was by an extended family member, so that was even better, as it wasn't just a family that came out of nowhere that wanted to care for them, but it was somebody in their extended family relationship too. And had the CASA not said, hey, we need to look at this, we need to make sure these kids can be together, they might never have really investigated that option with the extended family member. So those children were adopted together by their extended family, and so they really were able to maintain all those connections. And I think that that's just one example of where CASAs really can make a difference that the other folks in the system may not have the capacity to do.
And I think that's a great example, too, because we can all visualize that. I sometimes will default to a foster child as somebody maybe 8, 10, teens in my mind, but to recognize it could be an infant.
Yes.
A 1, 2, 3, 4-year-old, which prompts a question. You have the foster homes where people are the foster parents who are with the children, but in every case, there's probably not an opportunity to go directly from the system to the home. Are there other collaborative relationships that you've got that maybe are the temporary residence for the foster children before they can get into the home?
For older youth, yes. Usually with infants and young children, they try to place them in a foster home immediately because of just the context and the needs and the vulnerabilities of a child that age. Mm-hmm. With older youth, there are some facilities and resources in the community, sort of temporary placements. The Children's Receiving Home is one here in Sacramento County. That is an option if no home can be identified. And unfortunately, we do have a shortage of foster homes in our community and across the state. So it is more likely than not that many of our older youth will make that stop. And it is a different kind of setting. They don't have the family setting that we all have identified as being the highest quality type of setting for a young person. But, they have the opportunity to go to school, to get services there while they look for a more permanent facility or family for them.
Well, and thankfully we have those opportunities too, because what would happen if they didn't? I mean, that would really be tragic.
Yes. We've all heard the stories of kids maybe sleeping on in a hallway in an office space or whatever. And that's no one's idea of a good outcome. So I think that's important that our child welfare system has those resources in place for those kids who we don't have a permanent placement yet identified, but need some kind of transition. It should be safe and well known to the community.
How does a foster child get identified to CASA? How's that original connection happen?
Well, there are many ways. Initially, the court can identify children that need a CASA or they feel would benefit from a CASA. Here in our community, there are more children that are in need of a CASA than we have CASA volunteers to provide. So the court has to make its judgment on who may best be served by a CASA volunteer. Tends to be children who have been in the system a long time or don't have a great likelihood of going home to mom and dad or any permanency within the system. They're kind of alone and on their own, maybe bouncing around foster families because they haven't found something that really clicks well for them. Maybe they have other challenges. So the CASA can kind of be a stabilizing force in that circumstance where they come in and they spend that one-on-one time with a youth. So the court looks at those things. So they won't refer a case where it is a child like that who's been in the system a long time. We are also getting cases from the get-go now when kids first come into the system. Rather than waiting till they've been in foster care for a long time, the court's like, let's get them a CASA right away so that hopefully that can shorten their stay in the foster care system overall. And we're big proponents of that. The children can be referred by their attorneys, by their social workers, by their teachers. Some of our older youth even self-refer. So they may be, 15, 16, and they know someone who also has a CASA volunteer, and maybe they don't have anyone else in their lives, and so they're reaching out for that support that they know a CASA can provide or that they've learned about from the system. And so they'll refer themselves, and then we go back to the court and say, you didn't identify this youth, but they've identified themselves. And, of course, the court is very supportive in allowing CASA to serve those youth as well.
And so the CASA will follow the child from home to home if necessary. So they're aware of it. It's not just placement and done. They're with that child for what duration?
They're absolutely with them from the day they're appointed until hopefully they don't no longer need the CASA or the case is closed. The CASA stays with the youth no matter where they're placed, and sometimes that's maybe multiple foster homes, could be even out of county. We have a lot of kids who are placed out of county. So the CASA stays with that youth. They, hopefully are able to stay in their same school, but if they're moving around, sometimes that's not the case. So oftentimes the CASA is really that only one constant during the time the child is in foster care. A social worker might change, an attorney might change, judge might change, placements change, schools change. But that CASA can follow them wherever they go, even if they're out of county, and they make sure that there's that consistent relationship, somebody who's known them. On average, CASAs serve about 2.5 years, but we've had cases that have gone up to 9-10 years because you've had a youth who's been in the system that long, and that one constant, that lifelong connection that they've made in those instances tends to be their CASA volunteer.
Well, I can see that relationship would build over time, and the trust and the consideration and care from the CASA to the child. I have an example from somebody that I used to work with, and same situation. He's still in touch with his CASA 20 years later. As the child has gone on to college, he's moved out of market, meaning the CASA, and they still stay in touch. And he sees that child as a part of his own family in some way, shape, or form. So the commitment really was there all the way through.
Yes, that's not uncommon, and it's actually a wonderful result of the CASA opportunity and experience. We don't expect that necessarily. We hope that the advocates will be there for their youth as long as they need them. But because you're working with a child in a time of crisis and uncertainty, and they're bouncing around, and many times they're teenagers, which is difficult enough for anyone, that relationship with the CASA becomes one of great trust, mutual respect, and consideration. And we really do believe that you can be a better advocate if you truly know someone and what their needs are. Well, that time and attention that the CASAs spend with their youth, meeting with them weekly, phone calls, texts, doing things in person like going to the park or doing homework or, filling out a resume if it's an older youth who wants to look for a job, really providing some modeling and mentoring for them on how they navigate the bigger world and maybe not just focus on, okay, you're a kid in foster care. You're also a young person, in this world. What do you love? What do you care about? Can we explore some of those things? What possibilities are out there for you? The CASA is really fortunate to have that capacity to do those things, which a lot of other people in the system just don't because they are serving so many kids. And I think that investment of time and attention matters to the young person. It helps them understand their own value and also, learn and grow in a way that they have possibility for tomorrow. And that's a really big part of what we do too.
You mentioned in the county a couple of times. Could you identify how the CASA system is set up? Is it by county by county, statewide, national?
Absolutely. So my program, Court Appointed Special Advocates of Sacramento County, serves the Sacramento County Juvenile Court and the children that are before the court. In California, it is by county and court jurisdiction. So we have in California 44 programs, CASA programs, serving 52 counties. We only serve Sacramento. CASA serves Sacramento County youth, but they can be placed anywhere. So we go beyond the county boundaries as far as geography is concerned, but our appointments are tied to the juvenile court. And that's pretty much how it's set up in California. So if you're in a particular county and your county has a juvenile court, your CASA program would be affiliated through there if you wish to serve in your own community. Nationally, we are a part of a national network. There are over 900 CASA programs in the United States. And a significant number of volunteers. It's a little bit different, and the models are a little bit different depending on the states and the jurisdiction. What we have here in California is called the Friend of Court model. So CASA volunteers are actually they're court officers, and they serve at the pleasure of the court, but they're not a party to the case. They don't have a vested interest in the legal outcome. They are really there to advise and provide the court with information about what's in the best interests of the child before them.
Sacramento County, how many foster children, foster youth are there roughly in Sacramento County, since that's the one that you serve?
Right now, it's about 1,200 children and youth who are in the foster care system. And we serve about 300 a year, and we would hopefully serve every child that needs a CASA. We tend to focus on kids, as we've mentioned, who've been bouncing around the system, maybe don't have other people in their lives. That isn't every child that comes into foster care, but we have a significant population. That is, we are the 5th largest foster care system in California. Now, there's others that eclipse us significantly, like Los Angeles.
I would say by density of population,
yes,
I would imagine.
by density of population and population of children in care. But we are one of the 5th largest by population of children in the foster care system. So it's a significant size system. It is definitely larger than a lot of the local communities around us. And we have a lot of kids who have also spent many years in the foster care system. So these aren't necessarily kids who are going to come in and turn around and get out of the system quickly. They may be here for a little while, and it's really important then that we connect them with a CASA while they're in the system.
Of the 1,200, 300 served, that's a quarter. You're serving a quarter of that population, but not all of the population needs a CASA, correct?
I don't think every child is desperate for a CASA. Would the court like every child to have a CASA? Yes.
They would, okay.
Yes, we would love to be able to serve every child if they need a CASA. Some kids are working with family to go back home and be reunified. There's oftentimes a role for CASA to play in supporting that. But I do think that we tend to focus in our community on those kids who have no one else. And so that doesn't speak to every child in the foster care system. And some kids are, on the path to reunifying with mom and dad. And that kind of service would look very different. Mm-hmm. Or you have an infant and a toddler, it looks very different. Those kinds of cases might be shorter service terms for a CASA, but the court would love every child that needs a CASA to have one. And that it's certainly more than the number that we're serving currently.
Just out of curiosity, how many, a percentage maybe would be better, of the children do get reunified with the family versus end up in foster care?
I want to say it's about 25% of the kids that come in are on that track for unification. It could be a little bit higher than that.
Okay.
Since we work with primarily children who that might not be the planned outcome, we don't spend a lot of time on those kinds of cases because there's so many other children that are waiting.
So you wouldn't see those
So we wouldn't see those regularly. That's not to say we don't.
Yeah.
There can be times when the court thinks it's really particularly important in a certain instance, maybe a very young child, sibling groups like I just mentioned, where a CASA could be really instrumental in supporting either reunification or some kind of identification of permanency for those kids. But the majority of the kids that we serve here in our community are kids who've been in foster care for a while or maybe looking to age out at age 21. So the likelihood of them going back to mom and dad isn't high. It's what other kinds of permanency might we help support them towards, whether that's somebody taking guardianship, a really great foster family that cares about them and will help see them to adulthood. Mm-hmm. All those kinds of things are really important as well.
You say 21. At 18, they're technically emancipated to where they can make their own decisions, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that. And then we're going to get into what a CASA needs to be, because you're doing a fabulous job of explaining the need for the program. But at some point, the foster child can say, I'm out.
Yes. When youth in care turn 18, they have the option of opting into extended foster care through age 21 or leaving the system. And the majority of them, well over 90%, opt to stay in because it provides resources, housing,
semblance of security,
a sense of security. It's a lot to ask anyone at 18 to branch out and become an adult overnight.
Right.
And so
I'm thrilled to hear that it's such a high number. I would not have guessed it would be.
I think when they originally thought about this and rolled it out, they really weren't expecting that high of an opt-in percentage, which I found confusing because what else were the kids going to do? There's really not a lot else set up. So it's extended foster care is a wonderful opportunity for kids to get a little bit more nurturing and support, but also the transition now at 18 is how do we serve you and support you into a transition to adulthood? So we spend a lot of time in our program working with kids in that situation. Most of our kids, a good 60%, are 16 to 21. So we're working a lot with that population. And it's about connecting them to resources for housing, career opportunities, getting their education, making sure they get their high school diploma, or if they're interested in going to a vocational program, college, or directly to the workforce. How do we support them in doing that? What other connections in the community? Maybe they have things they love to do. Maybe they're into arts or sports or, those kinds of connections can be really instrumental in feeling a sense of self-worth and empowerment that can help them in their lives overall. So we spend a lot of time with that. And then also making sure that they understand that once you're out of the system, what is there to work with you for a while and what do you need to do to be sure? Because now you're going to be held accountable as an adult to make sure you're following through on your promises and obligations. And that can be new for some of our kids. And so it's great to have a CASA during that period of time. And extended foster care saves lives because it really does help young people have a softer transition to the wider world, less homelessness, that more of them are employed, less victimization goes on when they have those additional supports. It's really, really key.
We're going to learn a little bit more about what it takes to become a CASA right after this short break. I was in the media business for over 35 years and had the great privilege of working with Runyon Saltzman, RSE, Marketing, Advertising, and Public Relations. We collaborated on many different campaigns, but their commitment to the nonprofit sector hasn't changed since their founder, Gene Runyon, started the agency. Over many years and many campaigns, Runyon Saltzman has been committed to improving lives by tackling California's most challenging issues. Guided by research-informed strategies and insightful, creative solutions, RSE develops innovative communications campaigns that raise awareness, educate, and reduce stigma in diverse communities throughout our state and beyond. To learn more about RSE, visit rs-e.com.
Hello, this is Scott Thomas with CapTrust in our Sacramento office. I specialize in working with local nonprofits and associations. Annually, we survey private and public nonprofit organizations across the country to better understand challenges they see in today's environment. In our more recent survey, we heard concerns about proper board governance, mission-aligned investment, and how to implement alternative investments. If you would like a copy of the survey or to discuss your organization, look me up, Scott Thomas at captrust.com.
I'm thrilled to have Western Health Advantage partnering with us as they do so much to support so many nonprofit agencies in our community. As a truly local health plan, you'll find individual and family options, employer options, plans for CalPERS and Medicare Advantage. From medical services to pharmacy, health and wellness support, as well as behavioral health care, Western Health Advantage has a plan that fits what you need. As an employer, for profit or nonprofit business, individual or family, you can find more at westernhealth.com. Now, I'm interested in being a CASA. What does that look like? What are the qualifications? What do you look for? Let's talk a little bit about somebody who has an interest in becoming a CASA.
Absolutely. And I'll hold you to that, Jeff. We absolutely need more volunteers. So becoming a CASA volunteer is a pretty significant volunteer commitment. But I really want to emphasize as we dive into the details of it, it's also something most people can do. It is digging deep sometimes to really figure out how you can support somebody in a very difficult period of their lives by just virtue of showing up and being there for them. So the volunteers that sign up to become CASAs, they go through an extensive application process, much like applying for a job.
As I would hope and imagine.
Yes. Background screening. We do, but we check backgrounds, make sure that you're safe to work with youth, make sure we answer any questions you have. We do an initial orientation, which goes into great detail about what we do so that you have a good idea of what you're signing up for. And then because CASA is a court program, we have to adhere to guidelines provided by the Welfare and Institutions Code and the California Rules of Court. Those are all great things because they provide a structure and an outline for how we run. And so people coming into this program when we're curious, it's all set up for you. It's very consistent. There's very good standards in there. You're not flying blind, so to speak. So you go through the training, which is about 40 hours, and it's about not only the foster care system, but also the juvenile justice system. So I hope we get to talk about that a little bit too. But after you go through the training, you will have been exposed to how to write court reports, how to engage with professionals in the system, meaning social workers, attorneys, how to participate in court hearings. You will be an officer of the court and you will be appointed by court order to a child in the system or a foster or a sibling group, And you have access to a lot of personal information and you have the right to ask questions on their behalf, to gather that information and bring it back to the court. So the court has all that information. And then you take that information from gathering and talking to other people in the system as well as your relationship with the young person. That's really key, is that youth input and youth voice as far as to what's going on for them, what we're asking for them. That goes into your report as well, is that opportunity to really have a good sense of who that young person is as a human being, not just somebody before the system. There's a lot of time spent on a weekly basis interacting with your youth. We talked about meeting in person. Maybe you go to a Kings game or the library, or you go out and try, the latest ramen restaurant, because that's a great way to bond with kids. Or maybe you're helping them really take some things off of their list of, maybe you need to help them get an ID, their driver's license, or
shopping for some clothes.
Shopping for clothes, preparing for a job interview. I mean, applying for financial aid for school, if that's an issue. What does it look like to go to a community college or a college? Maybe taking them for one of those tours so that they have an opportunity. So you're spending a lot of that time, and then a couple times a year, you're actually writing a report to the court about what you've experienced with the youth, what's going on in their lives, what the youth wants the court to know, and then making some recommendations based on that experience and those objective details that you're relaying. And that court report goes before the court. It gets sent to the parties in the case, and the court reads every single word. And the only other entity writing a court report in these cases is the child welfare system. The social worker, the ones that are overseeing the case, write a report about the young person, and CASA does. No one else does. So those pieces of information are significant in how the court looks at what's going on for the youth and what they need to do and how they're going to make some really important decisions for them. So that's kind of what it looks like. I would say that the majority of what we do is, and this is why I talk about, is something most people can do, is the majority of what we do and the bulk of your time is just going to be showing up and being consistently present for the young person that you're working with. They need that consistency. They need that support. And it's not hard to do. You can do it over coffee, over a game. Sometimes it's more important to have serious conversations too, but not to lose sight of the fact that they are human beings, and to bring more of their humanity out, allow them to enjoy life a little bit, is really key. And that helps build the trust between the advocate. That consistency, that showing up builds that trust. And then the young person knows they have someone in the courtroom with them, in the system, who has their back and can be there to help echo or elevate, their concerns if those exist.
Well, and you're also modeling for them. They're seeing that consistency, which is probably what they didn't have prior. It's how they unfortunately got in the situation they are.
Yeah, our kids come in from some very difficult circumstances, and it is good for them to see what a caring, stable adult looks like. Also, how to navigate adversity in a way that can be effective in getting people to respond to you, people acknowledging you. They may not have had that modeling, and we all benefit from that. So it is a really key piece. And then I will say that it's not just the kid getting something from the CASAs. I think we can't forget to realize that the CASAs get a lot from their kids. As we're all getting older or different places in our career, being around young people is pretty terrific. You get a different perspective. You learn a different language. You get to just see the world from their perspective, or the wonder or the questions they have, and to really kind of help and support them in a way that maybe somebody did that for you. It's a really gratifying feeling to be able to do that, and it can be a lot of fun. And I have learned so much from the youth that I've worked with. And also, it's really broadened my perspective about our community as a whole, our society as a whole. So I would say that people that care about not just children, but really making an impact in our community as a whole, this is a great opportunity, because you are really impacting the future when you're working with kids, and you get something out of it too.
Well, I'm thinking back to when my kids were in their teen years. I still felt kind of hip. Music, fashion, technology, and now they're long gone, and I'm trying to keep up. With what is this? What is this? I don't even recognize that.
Yes,
I think there's at some point a tipping point where you're just done. You're not going to be able to keep up. But the CASA child or your CASA youth could engage you regardless of the age that the CASA itself or person themselves are.
No, I think it's amusing to them, and it's also empowering for them to realize they know something you don't know, and that they have the ability to share too, and to expose you. So I think that's a real positive too. Both there's a good exchange there.
And I would imagine you have that spectrum of somebody who could be perceived as an older sibling, somebody who could be perceived as paternal, maternal, and all the way into, he's old enough to be my grandfather, but I love him. That sort of thing.
here's another person that cares about me.
Correct.
And yes, all those things probably do happen as far as how they identify. But at the end of the day, it's really like, that's my CASA. And they always light up. Our judges always say this. They when the CASA comes on Zoom or is in the courtroom with them, the kids light up just because I think they feel safer.
Back to that security. They have somebody that they trust.
Security and trust, but also that they know that this person they've talked about what they want, and they know that this person is also going to elevate their concerns. We're not there to just tell the court what the kid wants. It is sharing that information, but also then bringing our perspective as we also think this is what they need and in their best interests, so that there's the young person knows where we're coming from, but I think it is a sense of safety and security to have that caring adult with you during this process.
You mentioned juvenile justice. Let's come back to that for a second. What do you mean by juvenile justice?
Yes. So traditionally, CASA has served children who've been removed from their homes because of abuse, neglect, so kids are in the foster care system. And in our community, we now are able to serve children who are before the juvenile justice system. So what that means is that those are kids who we used to call them delinquents. We don't do that anymore.
Oh, jeez. That's right. I do recall that word.
Yes. But these are kids who made some poor choices, perhaps, and now they are before the juvenile justice side of the court, and they may have charges against them. They may have to participate in some probation to make amends and take care of things before they can move along on their way. Well, what we have found over the years, and this is, just from the court and everyone seeing it, is a lot of these kids are the same kids. It's not good kids, bad kids. It's kids who've come from some difficult circumstances. And in the juvenile justice side, they tend to obviously be older, teens and such. But what we're learning is they come into the system, and as they're evaluating their circumstances, not only did maybe they are charged with, allegedly they committed a crime, but they're seeing that the environment in which they're living in is probably not set up for their success as well. Maybe they're coming out of homes where there's a lot of violence, gang activity, things like that. So when they complete their terms of probation, maybe it's time then to focus on their education. Maybe it's time to look at how do we help keep them safe. Well, a lot of those kids can't return home because those environments are not set up to support their best interests. So they're actually entering foster care at that point. So their first intersection with the court was on the juvenile justice side. However, the perception now is that these kids need our support and care just as much as the kids on the foster care side. Again, a lot of the same ones, and some of the older kids that we serve, they may start out in foster care and they make a poor choice in a moment, and then they end up on the juvenile justice side. Well, CASA now continues to follow them there as well. So not just all over, but they follow him to that part of the court system as well. And our court is so grateful to have that because the kids really need that extra support, that existing relationship. They can really be a support to make sure that they meet the terms of their probation, that they get back into school, take care of that when they're coming out of the juvenile justice situation, that they have a plan, a plan for safety and what they're going to do. So it's new to us. The last several years we've been working on that. So now we are serving on both sides of the court, and I'm proud of that partnership with our court and our community partners. We work with the district attorney's office, the public defender's office, probation, to really provide similar kinds of supports through advocacy and mentoring that we do on the foster care side. And those kids are equally deserving of that.
I'm amazed at the amount of collaboration that's required just for you to function in so many different places.
It's significant. Yes, this is a highly intense type of work. We work with the court, of course, but that, again, juvenile justice and the dependency side. So that's the bench officers, the attorneys, the social workers. We're working with the child welfare professionals, social workers, probation. We work with the schools because CASAs serve as educational advocates for their youth, whether that's just going there and being an advocate or maybe even holding educational rights for their youth and making decisions for them. So we're in that health and behavioral health settings as well. And then as we talked about placements and jobs. So it really is a holistic approach to supporting a young person. So we have to engage community partners, system partners, and then bring people in from the community to serve in that role.
Yeah.
It's complex, but it's also really rewarding. There's some people doing amazing work, and I I have to say I've been doing this for a while, and I am so impressed by the people that show up year after year to do this work on behalf of our kids, whether it's through the CASA program, through our child welfare system, education system. There's a lot of care and experience that works collaboratively on behalf of these kids. We work better when we work as a team. And when the youth sees all of those people working together on their behalf, it matters to them.
It shows them they're important.
Yes.
If they see that many people beyond their CASA, wow,
Yep.
somebody cares about me.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about the organization itself. So I think we've got the understanding of the CASA. We've got the understanding now of what the CASA person looks like and needs to be and how they get engaged. How about your operation itself? How many people do you employ? What does that look like?
So right now, CASA Sacramento has 18 people on staff. The majority of those people are related to the program services. So there are case supervisors who support advocates as they're going through the process. We have people that go out and recruit people in the community, people that train. We have staff that train them. I mentioned the Welfare and Institutions Code and the Rules of Court. We have very specific training. We bring in community partners for that training. So they get off to, start building that rapport even before you've become an officially taken your oath as a CASA. You've already met some of the people you would be working with. And then when a CASA is appointed to a youth, then they are assigned a case supervisor who's a staff member who knows all about the system and the resources and can help mediate challenges and is really there to be somebody to plan and support that advocate in their role with the youth. CASA works directly with the kids, but our staff works directly with the CASAs.
Right.
And youth as well, but it is really to support that relationship. And so then we also have people who we have an intake person who all the cases that get referred from the court, she's, screening them, getting information. She's reaching out to young people in advance to have that one-on-one conversation about this is what a CASA is, what are you hoping for? What are your needs? So not just from a referral that comes from the court, but we're reaching out to the youth as well. And then we have a lot of people that help raise money and resources for us. And we get some government funding, but a lot of what we do is community-focused fundraising with events and donations.
That was my next question. Tell me a little bit about how the organization is funded, because you're mandated by the court in some way, shape, or form. It's you need to be there. Well, how do they support you, and then what percentage of that is funded from either the system or fundraising that you have to initiate yourself?
Yes, it's a little different in every community, but
Meaning even every county?
In every county,
Okay.
In every CASA program, there are some similarities and there might be some differences. I will speak to Sacramento. We do receive some funding from our court. Every year we get a base amount of funding to support basic operations, and then they're incredibly generous in giving us our in-kind facilities. So we do not have to pay for office space. We have a wonderful office that houses our staff and allows for our trainings, allows us to bring the community in. We can have events with our youth there. That's huge, and that's something that we're very grateful for. That is not common. So our court has really made a commitment to its CASA program and supporting us in any way that they can. They have budget concerns too, but they do give us some funding. Other government funding in the Judicial Council of California, which is the administrative wing of our court system, they help fund a piece of every CASA program in the state. So we all get a certain amount of funding. It's not extensive, but it is there, again, to help provide some baseline services and to make sure there's some consistency and continuity. And then we also receive some funding right now through the Victims of Crime Act, which is federal funding supporting services for people who are victims of crime. Well, obviously,
is that sustaining or is it short term?
It usually has multi-year funding streams, but unfortunately, at the federal level, that particular pot of money has taken a significant hit. So in the next few years, we are really looking at a reduction in those funds. And they have, I have to say, in the last 6 to 7 years, they have provided a tremendous level of stability and support. They've allowed us just to lean in on doing program and getting CASAs. So it's a very needed resource, and a lot of other programs serving people in the community, not just CASA, rely on them. And so right now our funding is about 60% government and then 40% fundraising and donations. And it probably will get closer to 50-50 as we see the government funding go down. I also want to mention that in this, our California CASA Association was successful in getting state funding. So there was a certain amount of money allocated, over $60 million over several years in the state budget for California to provide to all the CASA programs. And so that pass-through money has been instrumental in our growth and our stability. We're very grateful for it. That would be lovely if that could continue at some level so that we can have a certain baseline of support. But then we do fundraisers every year. We have staff that works on sharing what we do with donors in the community so that they can participate. And as I mentioned, a lot of our things like rent and all of that, we're not out of pocket for that. So when folks donate to us, a good 85% of it is going directly to serving those youth because the majority of our staff serve directly those youth in those causes. So it's supporting some of that, the training, the recruitment, and just ensuring that we have an ongoing quality program.
That's a lot of activity. And I applaud you on one of them because I've been to your crab feed now a couple of years in a row, and you had a phenomenal
Thank you. That's our signature event.
It's a phenomenal event this year in terms of the return and the donations. Was that the largest year?
Yes. This year we were well over $330,000.
Right.
Yeah. Best year ever. Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yes.
That's just great to hear because it shows the engagement from the community to say we value this program and we want to see it continue and do what we need to do to make it continue.
Absolutely. A lot of our guests come back every year.
I recognize that as well. Yeah.
Tremendous support. And it's a way for us also to have a night where we get all of our favorite people in the room and are able to thank them and enjoy some time with them and walk away with some funds that really help the program continue on.
It's unusual. One thing I did notice is there were individual donors as sponsors. Typically it's corporate and companies. You had people.
Yes.
Which is really amazing. It just shows the care and interest in the children.
I think people, one, believe in our program, the affiliation with the court and the guidelines and structure that's set up. It makes a lot of people feel comfortable that CASA is doing what it says it needs to do and also that we're going to be there. But at the end of the day, it's that investment in our young people and knowing that giving funds to CASA is providing that relationship and support for each child that we serve, young person that we serve. And I think our community recognizes that that's an investment, not only in that young person's happiness and well-being, but our community as overall. And we're just very much blown away and incredibly grateful for the ongoing support we receive.
So let me ask you now, you've been with the organization how many years, roughly?
18 on staff.
Amazing.
23, it was when I've been affiliated since 2001 when I became a CASA volunteer.
So you started as a CASA and then worked your way in.
Yep.
Wonderful.
I was a CASA volunteer for about 3 years, started doing some special projects, and then lo and behold,
here you are.
Here I am 18 years later. Yes.
Give us a story of a CASA youth that has gone through the program that you can share. What we've talked about is fairly technical and there's some heaviosity to it all when you start thinking about the pieces and the process and all that. But there's that outcome, the result of a youth, a foster child that has gone through the program, was working with CASA, and is now where? I'm sure you've seen a lot of them, but if you could tell us one, there's this particular one or...
There's a lot of them.
I know.
And it's pretty amazing. And when you ask me that and they start popping up in my head, it makes me smile and it makes my heart feel good because it's just wonderful to see people thrive. I'll share one example of a CASA named Mike and his youth, Vincent, who is a young adult now and has exited foster care. CASA Michael is a pilot. And so he was able to share some of that interest with his young person. And his young person became very interested in what he was doing. And he actually helped him get a job as he was exiting the foster care system. And now he's a flight attendant, this young person, and he flies all over the world. He's taking care of himself. He's employed. He's excited about life. And he and his his former CASA volunteer are now just friends. Like we talked about, maybe it's like an extended family, but they have a relationship that will continue on for their life. But this young person, while he was in the system before he had his CASA, was bouncing around a little bit. And I think that relationship, they connected on a very personal level. And then the CASA thought about, sharing the things that he was passionate about. And they just happened to be things that really energized his young person. And so Vincent is now a very successful flight attendant going all over the world. And I remember being at our crab feed in particular, and one of our bench officers came up to me and she said, I got to laugh. This kid's been to more countries than I have. And what a wonderful thing. Had he not met his CASA, maybe he would not have had that opportunity to see the world. And I just think about that, whether you're flying around to different countries or just getting out in your community and thriving. That's just a whole nother level of opportunity, that independent relationship. We're not tied to the system. We engage it, but we're not tied to it. That independent connection can really be focused on what that young person needs and give opportunities where it might not otherwise exist.
And to think that he sort of followed in his CASA's footsteps. And the stories they can tell about countries they've been to, those airports, just people on the plane, just
I don't know if they've ever been where the CASA's been the pilot and he's been a flight attendant on the same flight, but I'm sure that will happen.
Are they
at
the
some point.
same airline?
I believe so, yes.
Oh, wouldn't that be a trip?
Yeah. But I mean, it's just, again, that connection helped that young person see more possibility and then also support them in trying to access that possibility.
Well, the ability to have that independent lifestyle like that's even harder because you're on the road all the time.
Yeah.
You're living out of a suitcase for a good portion of your life when you travel like that, and that takes a different set of responsibilities.
I would argue that foster youth are more adapted to that than the population in general. So maybe it fits on a level we hadn't even thought about. That ability to get up and go is just more inherent in this young person, and he's more excited about it.
We've got listeners' ears right now. What would you say is the greatest need at this point in time for CASA Sacramento?
We need more volunteers to step up and be CASA volunteers. We need men in particular, but men, women, all walks of life are very much needed.
Are CASAs matched gender?
Usually, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Usually, we have half of our youth that are referred to us are boys. We only have about 15% of our advocates are male. So we try to definitely match those young men with a male volunteer, but we can't do that for all of them. And it just depends on the situation. We put a lot of effort into trying to match well the youth and the advocate, what's in the best interest of that young person. But we do need volunteers. And I want to really emphasize, even though there's a lot of court process and a lot of system work, the majority of the time that people spend is that one-on-one time with the youth. And it's, 5 to 10 hours a month. It's really doable. It's flexible. And it's just, hopefully you can be there for a year or two as they need you to be there. Sometimes people stay longer because of the connection with their youth. But we need volunteers to step up. Now, not everyone can do this. If you can't do it, but you think what we do makes sense and you want to support a youth, then think about providing financial support through a donation, through coming to a fundraiser, because those dollars are needed to recruit, train, and then support these advocates. So if you can't do it yourself, you can make a contribution to help activate someone else. You might have somebody come in and says, I have the time. I can't be a donor, but I want to be an advocate. Wonderful. Maybe we have somebody who can't be an advocate, but they have the resources to be a donor. Well, that's a win-win. We have the funds to support the match, and we have the person who's stepping up to be a volunteer. So either way, you can really support our youth. And again, I would just encourage people to think about, if you have a year or a year and a half, what could you do a little bit of time each week to make a huge difference in someone's life? And I think CASA is something you should definitely explore.
And not only their life, but in our community and personally, there's a visceral response to giving.
Yes.
People feel good about doing good.
Absolutely. You get something back from it as well, don't you? You're not only putting good vibes out of there into the universe, but there is something that benefits us as well, whether it's that time. And like I said, we get something from the kids, but also knowing, okay, maybe I don't have the time to do this, but that doesn't mean I don't have the ability to impact this child's life. I can be a donor, and that is important as well.
And it's tangible. You get to see the effect of what you've done. You can see it by the success of the program. You can see it by the activity of the CASAs.
Absolutely.
It is a win-win all the way around.
It really is. And we, like I said, we serve 300 kids a year. We'd like to serve 500 kids a year. So we have a ways to go and more CASAs to recruit.
Well, maybe at some point, hopefully that starts to diminish and we don't have to serve as many because that means our community is doing better in terms of kids coming into the program too.
There's more services on the front end before they enter the system. And yes, that is happening.
Which is wonderful to hear too.
Yes.
How does somebody get in touch with you if they're interested?
So a couple of ways. One, we're all over social media. We have Facebook. We have Instagram. We
you
have
get those
Twitter.
kids to help you with TikTok and technology, right?
LinkedIn, yes. I don't think we have a TikTok, and then our website, sacramentocasa.org. You can go onto the website. You can click a link. You can find out all about us. You can do a video orientation, and you can start submitting your application right then and there. You don't even have to get out of your PJs to come and find out about CASA. And then once you submit that inquiry, we'll reach out to you personally, and then I'll let you know about next steps and what the training looks like. We do training 4 to 5 times a year. Okay. So you can reach out to us whenever and then figure out what works for your schedule. But we're doing that all year round, and the need is always there. Right now we have 28 kids on our wait list, so I would love to see us get 28 people in our next training class. Starts in May, but then there'll be another one in July. So please just reach out when you can, because CASA is always training. That's
great. I'm glad you gave those dates. And the website is really robust. Everything seems to be there. In my naive, working with it, some great little videos that you've got and a lot of specific activities and detail, again, back to the detail that we started with in the conversation.
We've put a lot of time and effort and resources into upgrading that because we know it's the first touch a lot of people may have with the organization after they've heard, this interview or they've read something or they've seen a commercial. It gives a deeper dive, and we really want to make it easy for people to learn as much as possible, but then know that we're accessible also. So we have put a lot of time and effort into that.
Well, Carol, I feel privileged to have somebody who's been in the system, working in their program for 20 plus years. And especially because it's a detailed program, the equity and the knowledge that you've got as historical and experience is wonderful. It's really beneficial to the program itself and to the CASAs that come in and your team, I'm sure, all the way around. So thank you so much for what you do and in helping our community better serve those children who don't have the benefit of the household that some others do. They have these challenge situations, and it's great that there's an opportunity for them to get involved with the support and the legal system that gets them out of some of those situations. We really appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Well, we all have an opportunity to help change a child's life, and I invite people to reach out.
We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, we're grateful to the businesses who have made this program possible. Cap Trust, fiduciary advice for endowments and foundations. You can find them in Sacramento, Roseville, and Folsom, or at captrust.com. Runyon Saltzman Incorporated, RSC, marketing, advertising, and public relations, creating integrated communications committed to improving lives. You can find them at rs-e.com. And Western Health Advantage, a full-service healthcare plan for individuals, employer groups, and families. westernhealth.com. Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Podcast Series. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If what you heard moved you, please reach out to that organization and do what you can to help. If you like and appreciate what we're doing to support local nonprofits, please give us a positive review, subscribe, and share. If you're a nonprofit with an interest in participating in an episode, you can reach us at info@multipointstrategies.com. The Nonprofit Podcast Network is a production of Multipoint Content Strategies and is recorded and edited by Hear Me Now Studio.